the latest forecast showing a projected $1.65 billion surplus, lawmakers can begin to hone their priorities. Joining me in the studio to talk about the goals of the Senate Republican caucus is the Majority Leader, Paul Gazelka. Welcome.
Good to be here again.
Your caucus recently released your Advancing Minnesota agenda with plans to build on the early successes thus far this session. Because of the uncertainty surrounding federal policy, Governor Dayton recently suggested with the budget to be cautious. Do you agree with a cautious approach?
Certainly I agree with the cautious approach. I think having a healthy surplus is important. We also look at how we're spending money, and that is where we will be different from the governor. He has a 10% spending increase. We want that to be lower because we're looking for the future and what the federal government might do. So, but the general sense of make sure we're careful and cautious includes spending. And then the tax relief we do, we want it to have long-term results. So yeah, I can say we're in agreement, sort of.
Sort of in agreement. Now you said the figure 10%. The Democrats have said that it's actually closer to 2.5% when you take into account inflation and things like that. So you want to trim expenditures. Can you talk a little bit more about some budget priorities?
Yeah, and first of all, just to counter that comment, state government is growing 7% if we do nothing. All of the past legislative decisions and different costs that increase, but that's still a 7% increase. And then with the governor increasing above that another 3%, you can't say it's just a 3% increase. It's 10% up from the prior year. So I think it's really important. But as far as priorities for the budget, we really want to get a roads and bridges bill done. We want tax relief. I hope that we have somewhere around $1 billion of tax relief, but that is not quite decided within our caucus. It will be soon. We want to make sure that we fix the health care crisis. We took the first step. That it was passed in January where we gave relief, but also had 7 reforms for health care. And so those are our main things that we really want to make sure we get done. The governor talks about a bonding bill. We'll work with him on that as well. But the priorities are the main things that need to get done.
Now you said $1 billion in tax cuts, and we do have a $1.65 billion surplus. How much of that should maybe be a cushion, though? You referred to family budgets and not wanting to, wanting to keep that in mind in how families budget, and if they can afford it, families budget so that there is that cushion. So do you really want to give all of it back in tax relief, or should there be some buffer, just in case something happens?
Yeah, and that's why we have the rainy day and the reserve funds that we have. Those are at $2 billion, which is about twice what it's ever been if you go back 5 years ago and earlier. So we've filled those up, or almost to the new a number that it should be. And so as we look at the forecast and then the extended forecast, the numbers are even more promising. And so we raised taxes $2 billion when we were in a recession, above what we had 4 years ago. We're just saying some of that money should go back to the people that have been paying the taxes. And so I think it's reasonable. We will be careful, but we also want to look at spending. Spending should not go up 10%, 7%. If you look at your family budget, it doesn't go up 7%. So we want to try to align government with what happens in the world outside of government.
So can you be more specific about tax relief, individuals, corporations, businesses? What are you looking at there?
Yes.
Yes, all three.
So if you look at the bill last year, we had a number of things in there. We had ag property tax relief, we had small business property tax relief, we had relief for student loans, and a whole host of other things. One of the things that was in the House language that was not in the Senate language was Social Security income exemption. I want to take a serious look at that one as well. But in the end, we'll have a first bill, and we'll have to decide how much between us and the governor we'll actually get. But we want to let people know what Republicans want to do if we were leading the entire state.
Let's turn to workers. The state is potentially facing a worker shortage. You've said that your caucus would like to improve programs that target worker training for industries that are having trouble finding workers. What are some ideas there?
Well, there's a couple of bills that Senator Paul Anderson has introduced specifically related to youth and getting them plugged into some of the high-tech STEM, I always forget the right word, but getting them plugged in early and finding apprenticeship jobs. I will say that Senator Jeremy Miller is over jobs, and he knows that this is a priority, so I'm leaning on him to find the right mix with the budget that we give him. But youth is one of the focuses that we certainly have to get them into the marketplace into higher end jobs that they would be rewarded for as well.
Let's turn to long-term transportation funding. Everyone agrees we need to invest in our roads and bridge infrastructure. Some would say also light rail and mass transit in the Twin Cities. What is your plan for funding and what are your goals?
Well, it's not set in stone, but if you look to last year in the House language, they had sales tax on auto parts, which generated about $200 million a year. That's a first step that I feel comfortable saying this is what we want to do. We would like to do more than that. I think the governor wants to do more than that. Light rail is on a different rail right now. The governor made some decisions to allow Hennepin County to increase the tax. I'm not looking at that one right now. I'd rather just focus on roads, bridges, and transit related to buses. I think we all can agree, let's get this done. I think the governor has been, I think, more open towards that. We are open. I believe the House is open. So this feels like the year that there's no excuse. And on my part, we'll get it done. I hope that we'll have at least $300 million per year, but we'll start with, we'll just say sales tax on auto parts is something I can publicly say, and then beyond that, we'll see what else we can put together.
Let's turn to education for a moment. The achievement gap has narrowed according to a recent Minnesota Public Radio report, which said that the state's four-year high school graduation rate rose and racial gaps narrowed. One could argue that some of the recent changes are showing promise. What does your caucus want to do to continue building on education opportunities for students?
Well, first of all, as far as that achievement gap, I think it changed 0.2%. I mean, so not
it was small,
not a big change. And if you look at the Hispanic direction, it was actually the opposite direction. So yeah, I think it's mixed, the results that we see. And if we do nothing, K-12 education already is going to go up $800 million of spending. So is more money the issue? Maybe, but we should be looking at other factors as well. One of them that we want to focus on is opportunity scholarships. And what that means is if you're in a failing school, inner city in particular, we're going to form scholarships that are given by corporate donations, individual donations to a nonprofit that can find students that are underprivileged that would want to make a change. If they wanted to go to a different school, we're going to help them. Because I visited one school where it was a Catholic parochial school in the inner city, 100% graduation, 100%. Same area, that school district that wasn't doing well, 52% graduation. So there are going to be some families that would provide them a way out. We'll look at a number of issues related to LIFO, how we relate to teachers and whether they, do we automatically keep a teacher if a school is shrinking and there's a teacher that's been there a long time and a younger teacher that the school might really want. We want to give the schools more flexibility. Another issue that we're working on is more forms of licensure, particularly for rural Minnesota. If they can't get, for example, somebody to teach engineering, but there's an engineer that would come in 1 or 2 hours a day and teach a class, can we find some additional levels of licensing to help ease that problem? So we're looking at reform. Not just more money. I think we'll provide more money, but reform too.
And one last question. No conversation is complete without talking about health care. Uncertainty remains with the Affordable Care Act. What would Republicans like to do to improve health care outcomes and lower costs?
So first of all, the uncertainty is still out there. I mean, we don't know what the federal government's going to do, not towards Obamacare and MNsure, not towards all the government plans that we use to help people. We don't know. We know that they could reduce what they give to us as much as $2 billion. And so there's multiple issues here. The first one that we're working on is to stabilize the individual market. So we passed that first bill that had relief with 7 reforms. Some of those reforms were inviting more competition into Minnesota. We, for one, said that a for-profit HMO could at least come to Minnesota if they wanted to. Right now, before that, they were not allowed to. 49 other states allowed it. We did not. We set up what are called stop-loss programs, which are where small businesses can form self-insured groups to provide health insurance for their folks. So those are some of the issues, but the first and next issue we're working on is reinsurance. That's the one thing that the plans are looking for to bring stability. So that's our next step. And then beyond that, we'll work on controlling other costs, I can tell, and flexibility. Senator Scott Jensen is working on a plan that says you can keep your doctor. How do we work it where plans change, things change, and you can still keep your doctor? That was a promise that government, without pointing fingers, government gave in the past. How do we figure out a way to do that? And so there's going to be, and he's one of the guys I'm going to lean on because he's in the thick of it. And frankly, even Senator Klein from the other side of the aisle, two doctors that can tell us where are the ways that we can drive down costs.
Yeah, the real world experience.
Yes.
Senator Gazelka, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.